a conversation here in Morning at NTV, the 7th of June 2015. Yes, if we are in Ethiopia, but if we come back to reality, it's the 14th of February 2023. And in our Kickstarter this morning, we're going to be looking at KCCA's reawakening of the Pollution Control Act. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, when I go to my Google and find out what is noise pollution, or something that we studied in science back in primary school, or sound pollution, this is the propagation of noise or sound with ranging impacts on the activity of human or animal life, most of which are harmful to a degree. The source of outdoor noise worldwide is mainly caused by machines, transport, and propagation systems. So that is the backbone of what we're going to be having a conversation around, and looking at the National Environment Noise Standards and Control Regulations 2003 under sections 28 and 107 of the National Environment Act Cap 153. It stipulates that no person shall, for any activity specified in Regulation 6, emit noise in excess of the permissible noise levels unless permitted by a license issued under the regulations. However, noise has been more emitted today due to growing industrialization during day, and of course the entertainment life that drops a few pearls in the nights for the night lovers. Now, KCCA has come upon with this noise pollution. It's been existent, but at the backbone of it, it's noted with concern that you people are making so much noise. You're setting up so many bars. COVID-19 showed people that they can set up mini bars on their verandas, on their kiosks around them, so that they don't have to go far to enjoy their life because of the limitations and restrictions that came through with COVID-19. However, more noise has been emitted, and it's been going beyond the permissible levels as well as the permissible time. So it's upon this backbone that KCCA has begun proposing a number of interventions, but Kampala people are big-headed a bit. They seem to be having more problems to focus on, such as the poor roads, the terrible borders that are killing people day and night, the vendors that never get off the street, the taxi park that is on-off constructed, this one is allowed, this one is not allowed. All those wrangles have been taking center stage for KCCA every time it's been in the spotlight. But this morning we are joined by the spokesperson, Simon Kasiate, to give us more information in this regard and other things, as well as Mr. Anderson Burora, who is the resident city commissioner, and that is Rubaga Division. I will start with Mr. Burora. Good morning to you, and you're most welcome.
And also good morning to the viewers. It's a chilly morning. I hope the day ends up not in tears. Today is 14th of February.
Happy tea. So.
Yeah, whatever tea it will be, I hope it's in your favor. Don't lose yourself because your boyfriend or girlfriend disappeared or the phone is off. Or you abruptly got a trip out of town and it was not important that you go together. So whatever it is, God is good.
Okay, all right. Good morning to you, Kasiata. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Yes.
And yes, a happy good morning from all of us at City Hall. And hoping that we'll be able to especially dissect the IC situation that we have before us, which is noise pollution.
Okay, so getting into the situation itself, it's been reawakened by KCCA, and we want to understand that why has it been brought back to table? We have not been seeing fruits of it being bared. I think the most intense one was back in 2017, but since then it's been on the low-key. The best we have seen it being enacted is by the Gambanogos, who call the RCCs and tell those people to keep their noise down. If not, they go out of here. So where do we stand right now in its being reawakened?
Well, I wouldn't want to call it a reawakening of the situation, but let's say that KCCA has registered incredible cry and hue from city residents, especially those who cannot have a good night's sleep or have their mental state being affected by the neighborhood in which they live. So we've received complaints time and again, and many a times we actually go and do enforcement. But I think for the most part our experience has been that where we go and carry out enforcement, proprietors of these places or even patrons say, what law are you acting upon? Who gives you the right to come and, superintend over how I have a party or how I have a good time? So this time around, we recognize that enforcement is one thing, yes, but sensitization is important. That's why we issued that notice to say, look, one, there is not just a law, but there is also a limitation on how much noise can be emitted acceptable within a neighborhood that's residential, a neighborhood that's commercial, a neighborhood that's industrial. And these are there. And so we've always told them you cannot emit more than 40 decibels at night of sound. And someone tells you decibels VAVT. And so while we do not want to go into the area of ignorance is not a defense, we've decided at KCCA to go out on a mass sensitization campaign to try and build not just awareness, but also change mindsets as we also carry out firm enforcement. And you know how we do our enforcement. Many times when we carry out enforcements, the next morning everybody becomes a human rights activist. Manange KCCA, you are so brutal, you're so bad. Why? Simply because they were taken unawares, and we recognize that we cannot keep operating that way. Let's inform, let's sensitize, let's make popular the whole idea and reawaken people. I'll tell you what, Priscilla, many folks in this town are suffering silently, but they suffer from a powerlessness that they have to endure. That, look, Priscilla, who can I report to? A neighborhood church that's emanating noise at 2 a.m. in the morning. How many guys are in that church? Maybe 3 people, and they are using a public address system. In the dead of the night, you have a sick child or possibly a parent visiting that you see, or yourself preparing for your morning show. It's 2 a.m. You possibly went to bed at about 11 a.m. So you can't accost the pastor, because then to do so is to rub the wrong shoulder. So there's a neighborhood bar that's owned by a big guy like my brother here, Anderson, who, to try and go and tell them to low the music, then you possibly are met by a huge mean-looking Kanyama who will remind you of who's boss. So many a times residents are left without a choice but to make an appeal to KCCA, which once in a while will go out and carry out enforcement with resources available to us. But then we recognize that no, all this comes to naught if we do not carry out sensitization, so that people even begin to police themselves. People begin to develop a feeling of good neighborliness, to say, in the enjoyment of my right to a party, I should be cognizant of at least my obligations, not disrupt Priscilla's good night's sleep, because that's what she has chosen, or that's what the circumstances are forcing her into. So that give and take, to say, let's be thy brother's keeper. The same scripture which the many churches that are accused of noise pollution prescribe to tells you that you must love thy God, thyself, and thy neighbor.
Okay.
And people ask, who is thy neighbor? Thy neighbor is thy neighbor. I cannot put it in any other better way. And the same scripture says, if thy neighbor on earth feels so bad about you here on earth, there's no chance that thy God in heaven will have a good, favorable look at you. So
turning to RCC, in this regard, 2003 to 2023, this is 20 years of this in action. Now, we get to see a lot of development that has happened in our communities. In the residential communities, we sort of no longer have residential communities. It's 2 houses, then a bar. It's 2 houses, then a mini factory. It's 2 houses, then something that really has to emit some noise by default setting. And so there's been a lot of structure and setups that have been defined in regards to this being a reality, and more so people understanding it in the first place. So from where you sit, Burora, in regards to dispensation of this Pollution Control Act, where do we stand? Isn't it going to have to first take reorganization of our city before we can actually implement such things?
Well, I think the problem is not the law. Neither is the problem the bar owners or the noise polluters. The problem is the organizers, or the planners, and the enforcers of the law. It is unfortunate that why some even we have these issues. I am sorry to be speaking like this, but you realize that some of the people who are supposed to be enforcers of these laws are the owners of the bars. Now that is one. 2 is failure for KCCA to gazette and be hard on it and say this area has been gazetted for residential. We have a factory, a mini factory, as you have been saying, which has been making a lot of noise. We tried it, but unfortunately, legally, it has a license to operate in that specific area. Now, that license is issued by KCCA in a residential area to operate a mini factory. Neighbors complain. As authorities, you have to act, but the law is there also not so specific. Yes, there is noise, but I am permitted to pollute the noise in silently somewhere. So this conundrum, if I may say, that we are trying to deal with, we need to entirely look at the city planning. That is one. Two, if you say that bars that have been issued with notices before are going, the licenses are not going to be renewed, we don't know these bars, and it's the public to help you. You cannot ever do thorough enforcement without the participation of the public, without the participation of the people. Now, once you do it alone, without the goodwill of the people, you become a witch hunter. Now, that is one. The selective application of the enforcement. You can't jump 2-3 bars, you come to mine. You jump 2-3 churches, you come to another church. You jump 2-3 liquor spots, you come to this small woman who is operating with maybe a woofer or even some awkward speakers, and you want to enforce on me. You have jumped other bars. That does not make sense. So the reality part of it is KCCA should realign itself. First of all, publish all the lists of bars you have issued notices to, so that you move with the public. Tomorrow when you come to enforce, or you don't renew the license, we want to see all of these other licenses also not being renewed. Because also, some will use it. You come to renew a license, they tell you we have you on the list. And at the end of the day, we shall see some sort of extortion in the renewal of licenses. Why? You have not disclosed exactly what you are doing. So, KCCA playing hide and seek. Some cards are hidden, some cards are here. When I come to play the hard card or the most crucial card, you pull it from. I think that is not going. I think that is not going to help in this issue, because this is a public outcry. So
we can't rightly say that KCCA is the root cause of this noise pollution that we have.
You can't say that it is not. It is.
Yeah.
Two, if we are going to go back, Simon, don't laugh. It is. Why I'm saying that it is. We need to go back and review this. And if you are to review it and to reverse it, it is not in months, not even in 1 year. Because one, people have highly invested in these bars. You have to be considerate of that. Because they invested at your watch, you licensed them to operate. They have paid taxes. They are creating jobs. All of those are things that are important to look at. It's not waking up and you close a bar.
That in tandem actually helped KCCA do it.
Yeah, they have helped you walk the journey.
Simon, back to you. It all comes down to the core objectives and the mandate of Kampala City Authority in regards to managing this city. Now, he has referred to gazetting of certain areas, and by default setting that existed once upon a time in this life. In Kololo, you knew that was an entirely residential area. You knew that Muyenga is an entirely residential area. But this morning, as we speak, as you said, 2 houses in Kololo, the 3rd house has been turned into a bar. The son turned it into a bar to make money because his father wanted to move to the village.
Yes, this reminds me when your mother would beat you and she says, don't cry. she's beating you at the same time saying don't cry. So
okay. All right, so in terms of gazetting, 20 years down the road since this Regulations Act was presented, we have seen more distortion of what would have been the original demarcation plan by KCCA for those that are residing within Kampala as a city. That has been distorted. So why don't you first deal with that before you start dealing with the noise they are emitting?
We can't call it a distortion. It is actually a progression, or we say the metamorphosis of our city. A city that began initially on 7 hills and has grown to tens of hills. There is what we call change in land use. Change in land use means that, yes, as we see Kololo exclusively residential as it were, now you have mixed use in that you have restaurants in there, you've got lounges, and you know, these places increasingly are also becoming very innovative in how they name themselves. Now this is going to be a lounge for some high teas and incredibly, you know, settings for coffee and the like. And boom, in the evening, they turn into something that we did not license. So that inability, I must interrupt you, Priscilla, being it that's Valentine's Day, I ordered for some beautiful flowers coming in from KCCA, some chocolates for you specifically as a sign of love and affection. So I don't know why the camera person is not showing those flowers for us, but well, we must proceed with that conversation. So that change is legal. We issue out guidelines, but we also now must come forward and say, there is freedom of movement, for example, but there is a law against trespass. There is freedom of speech, but there is a law on libel and slander. Likewise, we license you to operate, but the same law tells you that from your operations, you should not exceed 40 decibels. No one is saying that KCCA bars are not allowed in these places, because who patronizes the bars? It's not KCCA employees, it's residents of Kololo and residents of Mukoto and residents of every place that patronize these bars. I like a bar in my neighborhood where I just walk with my vest, have a beer and go back to my house. But in operating that bar, there must be respect of the permissible noise levels. And the law is very clear. During the day, blast up to 60 decibels. During the night, do it up to 40. Now, bar owners or proprietors of these places must install noise detection facilities, the same way your car is fitted with a speedometer. And you know that as I'm driving and the speedometer limit on this highway is 80 kilometers per hour, you must be able to monitor. So is that an outlined expectation, or is it something you hope they should be doing? It is not just, it's stipulated in the law that they must have noise detection facilities. And with the enforcement that you have done so far, how true is this in reality? And that's what I was telling you, that we realize we're enforcing on a largely ignorant group of people, that they did not know the law. So ours now is to say, let's move on from the brute of enforcement to bring the carrot and stick method to say, let's do sensitization as well as enforcement. And that's why we're telling them, look, the law is clear. The moment you're buying equipment that includes these high-tech gadgets, include a noise monitoring gadget to be able to tell you that from outside your facility you should not emit so much noise. Okay, so Simon, walk me through how this carrot and stick is operating currently. Do you come to my bar and tell me this is the law and this is what you should be implementing and not implementing, and then you give me a period of time of implementation? Thereafter you come and assess if I have done according to the law? That takes that form in one way, but on the other we come and tell you, look, there's cry and hue from your neighbors. Will you please reduce your noise? But as KCCA, you can't be please. You can't be saying please reduce your noise. When we don't use the word please and we come with the brutal force that we normally are known and famous for, then like I said, all of a sudden you all become human rights activists. KCCA is using a hammer to kill a fly and the like. So we are saying there will be our law enforcement guys that will come to you, Priscilla, and show you who is boss. Then there will be Simon who will come on Morning at NTV and speak to you with the please. So do not be mistaken to think that KCCA has one face. We come with what we call carrot and stick. So we are going out with mass sensitization, and these bar owners don't operate in a vacuum. They have associations, they have got some kind of, you know, a fraternity in which they operate. Same with Pentecostal churches, same with Bizindaro owners and all that. So we are dealing with organized communities of these entrepreneurs, of these proprietors, to ensure that the message sinks into them, and then making public appeal and telling our Kampala citizens that, look, you are actually empowered as an ordinary Priscilla or Aurora here to feel the right to communicate to KCCA through a toll-free line, through WhatsApp, through any contact, and inform them of the inconvenience you're going through at the behest of your neighbor. So it's that combination of sensitization.
So who's on the list of the noisemakers? You have churches, you have bars, who else?
We've got industries, we have got business people who believe that to sell their Efinix phones they must put out loudspeakers on verandas and blast away at kids, not knowing that possibly upstairs is a clinic where people are being treated for, among other illnesses, psychiatric things. We also have people that are just blowing horns and sirens all over the place. We have folks that are, you know, if you choose to blast away fireworks, you know, and other detonatable substances for longer than the permissible time, because again, never mind, by the way, that there is regulation on how much noise can be emitted. The same law allows you to seek special permission if you are going to carry out something.
Okay, all right, Anderson, the things that you mentioned all exist in Ruaga Division currently. So while KCCA
not on the Ruaga Division, we have 5 divisions.
While KCCA does not have the power to restructure and gazette accordingly to what you have desiredly mentioned earlier on, while they cannot be in position to actually reorganize the city accordingly, for now, it is what it is. And in your position of resident city commissioner and other RCCs, what are you going to do to actually help put this in order?
Well, as RCCs, what we do is to keep, to check institutions, make sure the law is followed, make sure things are in order as they are supposed to be. It will be hard for us to operate outside the law, but also it will be hard for us to clean the mess created by someone, supposedly deliberately. What we are looking for, or what we think is important at this particular moment, is to make sure that KCCA's regulations are in order and in tandem of what is expected in the public. But also you don't have to use this enforcement, the brutal part of it. If the bar is noisy, you have evidence to that, let it be.
When you say you have evidence to that, am I supposed to record the noise?
No, there is evidence.
What proof will it be that the noise I recorded was not from the radio in my house?
Part of the evidence and the proof are the witnesses in the neighborhood, because they are the complainants. They are the consumers of this noise. Come in the morning, seal the bar, and have terms and conditions applied for the reopening. If you have signed the license, I think they have those terms and conditions.
Right.
What are you supposed to follow? If you break them, then I can rescind the license. You get it? There you have not interfered with the revelers, because there is an incident in Ichanja, I think you have heard of it, where even actually some people were beaten because someone is high. You are interrupting their peace in the middle of the night. You have to tell them why. In that, you have a scuffle, you will arrest, you will beat, but these people are under the influence, not of their conscience, but of these other substances. So you end up creating more rifts. Why don't you have it done in a manner that you are dealing with the bar owner and the regulator? Then to open, it is another thing. You have to agree how to open. And I think that the times have changed, that we need to revisit our enforcement modules. They are no longer plausible that we go fist on. I have to beat you, I have to jack, whatever you call it.
Jack you.
Yeah, I have to go out, take you to Kabangali, throw you down. It's no longer plausible. It makes you shabby to be preaching smart city but you're operating in analog way, in these ways of that are backward. So I think this conversation of noise pollution has a long way to go, but also there are so many other things that are hidden in it. Now, to us, we are just here, we are there to make sure that the public adheres to the law, but also whatever the law enforcers, the government officials, the government institutions are doing is what is in tandem with the public expectations. So how we help each other depends on the grounds available, the platforms available. What are the platforms? Okay. I will not lie to you that I am happy on how the treatment is being dispensed. It is not good, not for KCC, not for the public. As I told you, when you enter into a bar, you remove speakers, you remove mixers, you can even cause havoc there. You can easily have electricity sorting, you can cause stampede. People still have that trauma.
An abrupt fire.
An abrupt fire. So you don't walk in and pull out and pilot and bandwagon it, and that is, it is not. That doesn't show that you are on job. That in it is a symptom to show that you are sleeping on job. You're not doing whatever is supposed, that is within. Whereas you're given the authority to use the maximum force, to use the authority you have, but authority shouldn't be authoritative in itself. Authority is in how you apply, how you respond, how you approach issues, how you enforcement in the KCC. KCCA now is categorized as an enforcement entity of police, which is a very bad
Speaking of application of enforcement, let's look at one of the lines in section 27 of the Trade Licensing Act 1969. KCCA shall revoke trading licenses for other bars, entertainment places that contravene the noise standards and control regulations. So why won't you apply this frontward than being dilly-dallying and carrot-sticking with these people? It's as plain and simple as you have a backup here that can protect you to enforce what is rightful for all citizens of Kampala to enjoy life day and night.
Before I respond to that question, let me respond slightly to what Brola has just said. He makes very valid contributions, and I hear him loud and clear, especially on the modus of our enforcement and the need to have a fun outside but serious inside approach to some of these complex issues. He raises very important insights into what could happen when enforcement goes wrong. We would never forgive ourselves if in the course of our enforcement we cause more harm and damage than we initially went to circumvent. So Anderson, you can be very sure that KCCA being the listening and responsive authority that you have very much worked with, we will take this in great faith, and we will certainly move towards ensuring that, like all hands on deck, we try and do our work in the best way that we possibly can. That creates a win-win situation. But now turning to you, Priscilla, you're asking me a question on the pretext that you are assuming that every entertainment spot or any noisy meeting spot is actually, number one, licensed. Many of them are operating without license.
And so we're talking about those that are operating with the license.
Let me move it progressively. Now, to those that have no licenses, you don't even have a license to revoke. You come and shut down, and the shutting down can take various forms, including, not limited to what Anderson does talk about. That
what are the other forms of shutdown?
And wait in the morning, do not disturb the revelers, and all that. But then you also have situations where we are acting like with the third law of Newton.
So before we continue to that other third situation, have you enforced that particular nature?
Oh yes, we have had licenses revoked of some places. We have had cease notices issued to many of them. We have had warnings issued to them. But like Anderson did say
which
earlier,
are the most common areas that have raised this issue when it comes to licensing and closing them down?
Just before I come to that, we may have had a challenge in publicizing whose license we have revoked, whose cease order we have issued, or who a warning notice has been. Like you talked about, many a times we are operating from some kind of shadowy way, and that is certainly on the way out. We are going to be as transparent as it comes, because like we said, everybody uses that opaqueness in operations to try and create a situation that favors them in terms of narrative. Now, coming down directly to your question of then what has happened after you have revoked some licenses. We have had conversations with these folks. We have agreed on how to proceed with the next operation in case we open them. The moment they get their keys and padlocks off, they go back to business as usual. So it's a continuous thing, more like how sin continues to be pervaded every single day, never mind the fact that the clergy is out there on the prowl every day preaching against sin, and that we've had 10 commandments for the last millennia. That's the human nature that we have to deal with.
Between January and debt, how many of such have you actually worked on?
I would want to put the number into their hundreds, although I don't have the very much specifics. Why? Because in doing our work, we're also trying to be cognizant of the confidentiality of some of these businesses, because again,
but then you can't say confidentiality, I mean that word, and then you're the very same person saying that we want to now be as open.
Well, if you ask for it, I'll start naming Priscilla's Parlor, Priscilla's Lounge, and or then you come to me and you start, we now go into the counter accusation of libel and business.
No, because you're not mentioning names, you're mentioning businesses. That's two different things.
Well, those are entities that have the ability to sue and be sued in their own right.
Okay.
So sometimes we are cognizant of that, and like I said, we are damned when we do, we are damned when we don't, as KCCA. When we act with a human face, oh, why aren't you brute? When we are brute, you're too brute. The world has changed. You need to come and massage lawbreakers and treat them to a champagne-filled recreation kind of excursion to Chove and speak to them nicely on taxpayers' money. So many a times we have to do a very difficult balancing act.
So speaking of balancing act, in the high residential profile areas, you do have some bars that really interfere with people's sleep at night.
Absolutely.
However, they are guarded by uniforms at the entrance. How do you deal with those?
It's a dicey situation, Priscilla, I'll tell you. Our enforcement officers and those that go out there, for the most times, have faced a lot of what you'd call hazards in the way they do their work. I'll give you an example. There is an incredible street that sometimes I would, on my own day would want to patronize. In Bogoloa, we call it Bandari Rise. It has got more bars than you'll find churches in some districts. Yet it's the same place that has got high residential considerations. You have got, very high profile people living within. And those call non-stop over the night. And you get in there and you recognize that some of those bars you want to enforce on, the patrons inside are the who is who. In security, in the government, in judiciary, in everything. I'm not saying the RCC has been one of those that we found there. And so many a times, our enforcement officers have been accosted, they have been beaten, they have been detained. Can you imagine? But that does not stop us from going ahead to carry out our enforcement role within the circumstances in which we operate. I'll tell you what, we face a lot of precarious situations in the night, especially as we carry out enforcement. You go to speak nicely to a pastor and say, look, it's 2 a.m., your neighbors are complaining, and we've come to request you politely to turn down your loudspeakers. And before you know it, you're receiving a phone call threatening you and instilling the fear of God in you in such a manner that you'd wonder whether this is a worship place or it's actually a torture chamber. So those are the vagaries of the work that we do. Our thankless work that many a times you never get to the underbelly of which, but I'll tell you what, we do what we can in the best way for the goodness of our city residents.
Okay.
It's a dicey situation.
We'll be following up on that. Let me close on this conversation because I'd like to touch on borders as we come to a close of this conversation. Brora, where you sit, the pool, the tug of war between the political wing and the technical wing. While they want to do their work and enforce these things, you do have the political wing for which they have to sweat plasma if they're going to get anything past them. How do you advise these two sides actually work together?
Well, as I said earlier, the issue is not who is in the bar. Whether it is Aurora, whether it is Kasiate, if I find an open bar, to me, it is allowed to open. So I will enter. If a bar has a license and it has sought to get protection or guards or security and has every right to get it, it is not its fault. As I said, we need to go back and revise this whole issue. It is so complex, it is so big than you can imagine. Going back to the investors in these bars, going back to the taxes the KCCA is supposed to collect. All of those things must be put into consideration. And a very wide and scanty discussion must come on table. It's just more than waking up and you issue notice.
Speaking
because
of
this
table,
notice alone is not enforceable.
Yeah, allow me to table the border issue. Last year it was borders, register or not. If you don't register, you won't be operating in Kampala. Then those who registered, you put a deadline. Those who didn't register, interestingly, are still operating in Kampala. What is the update on this whole border management in Kampala?
Now, for the border, we had several deadlines, as you have reiterated, but what we encountered was request to put enough time for people, because there are so many processes that were supposed to be followed and so many discussions that had not been discussed before but are important at this particular moment. And all of those, we were, according to the consultations we had with different stakeholders, it was important that we relax somehow for all of these excuses to be put into consideration. Okay. Among the excuses, when the survey was done by KCC, almost 92% of the riders have or had never gone to riding or the riding school, what you call driving schools. Now, that is a very big number. Now, that is one. Two, we had to have issues to discuss on the riding permit, the costs or the fares of it, the licenses, the stages that had not been gazetted. Some are self-created, some are validly there, others were valid then, they are not valid now, because where they are banks. There is a transformer somewhere, there is a school somewhere, there is a school hospital somewhere, there is a big tree something, but also some are illegally there. Okay. Because they have forced themselves on someone's land. All right. Or others have created a stage in the middle of the road or in dangerous places. So to review all that, we thought that it should be done holistically, so that we come up with the regulation that stipulates that Regina stage is here. If you create another one there, it is illegal. That is one. Two, all of these processes must be followed. You have a rider's permit, you have enough time to train and go and process it. You have an operating license from where you are operating, but also there is a leadership. All right. So all of those discussions had to be put in place. And as of now, the deadline we have goes up to 1st May. Okay, so we shall be keeping eyes to the ground in regards to that and how far that process will actually be adopted in, with the border community. Wrapping this up, we do have some love message coming in from KCCA of the roadmap for city infrastructure projects. Hopefully, potholes will be done and dusted with by 1st May. Perhaps there's also a deadline to it. But what's your love message to the people of Kampala City?
That through the Kampala City Roads Reputation Project, the famed one that we've talked about, that will bestow onto this city incredible roads up to about 100 kilometers. The work has begun in earnest on some lots, because these are 5 lots scattered across our 5 divisions. Contractors have been sought for all the lots but one. They are now in what we call mobilization stage, where they are getting the equipment on sites and trying to put everything in order. But what you see physically on the ground, for the most part, is what we've discussed with the contractors to do, which is forward maintenance. For most of these roads, Salama Road, Sapolo Kagawa Road and the like, Old Port Bay Road, we have sections that are almost immotorable. Okay. So we've asked the contractors, why we begin the process of constructing these roads appropriately? Can we then make some of these sections motorable so that folks can use them? Now, when the works begin, average duration for this construction phase will be 36 months.
Okay.
So brace yourself for disruption,
Yeah.
distress, dust, and every D you can think about.
And that's the love message.
But
coming
again,
in
like we
from
say,
KCCA.
we have to bear all that,
Yes.
because to have a wonderful omelette, some eggs must break, unfortunately. So we have to endure all of this for us to have the great boulevards.
All right. And to have a wonderful Valentine, you must receive a chocolate and a
When you
flower.
guys preempt my start with this one here.
Happy Valentine's to
Happy
you,
Valentine's to you
Simon.
too, but
Happy
like it is
Valentine's to you,
With the
Anderson.
KCCA,
Yes.
I also came armed with my
Oh,
trio of roses,
All right.
wrapped in a black lace, the symbolism of which shall be explained off air. Happy Valentine's Day, Priscilla.
thank you so much,
With love
Simon.
from KCCA.
Thank you so much for the love. And yes, so do share some love here and there, as we are definitely showing you the way here in Morning at NTV. We take a short love breather. We'll be back shortly.